Welcome
Mhm.
back to the Road to Romance, where we're spotlighting matchmakers who aren't just connecting people, but challenging the norms of modern dating. And today we're tackling a big one, the fallout of swipe culture and why personalized matchmaking is making a real comeback. I'm joined by Jasbina Alawali, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, who brings a rare mix of intellectual rigor, cultural insight, and coaching precision to this conversation. She's been bridging East and West for years, helping Indian and South Asian singles find love with intention, strategy, and heart. After starting her career as an attorney, she built Intersection Match, a firm that serves Indian and South Asian singles across US, Canada, and the UK. What I really respect about Jasmina's approach is that it's not just dating, it's strategic and intentional. She's not just introducing people, she's helping them date smarter, more consciously, and with a clear sense of what matters. Jasbina, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, Arlene. Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you here. And I just want to begin because, when we talk to matchmakers, there's such a crazy background of different types of people that are going into this business. And I always say matchmaking is a calling because I've still haven't figured out that one thing that we all have in common that brings us into this industry. So I always say it is a calling, but let's begin with your shift from law to love. What led you to walk away from the legal career and build something so mission driven and, in the matchmaking world, basically?
That's a great question. So you mentioned the cultural backdrop. So let's start there, right? I'm what I consider a don't date, don't date, don't date. Hey, get married, which is basically in our culture where a lot of us, myself included, had parents who had arranged marriage. So culturally, that was more the norm, for a long time, right? And it still is for some people, right? So when one has a culture of arranged marriage, then it is great, focus on your studies, on your career, on all different things, right? And then, right, you're arranged and the marriage is the next step and we proceed that way, so that is great, except I was one of the people like our clients who the arranged marriage route didn't quite appeal, and rather what they wanted is rather than having a commitment and then developing feelings for somebody, they really wanted to have those feelings on their wedding day, right, and then build a life together. So that is what I wanted, that is what our clients want. So it's a switch. So what that does though is it makes dating have to be intentional, right, if one wants to get there. And so from that perspective, right, for me personally, when I got to a part where I was like, okay, I have the career, I have this, I have that. Now I'm ready for a serious relationship. But wait a minute, because I did all of these things, I don't have, right? I don't have that person. So then I embarked on what I call my adventures in dating, which was great. I dated a lot. I dated Indian, I dated non-Indian, and I ultimately culminated in finding my partner, and that's the path that I help our clients with. Now, not I always like to say there's don't date, don't date, don't date. Okay, get married. There's also don't ask, don't tell. So it's not that everyone, a lot of Indians also start dating earlier on than maybe I did, and a lot of other people do too. And so that comes with its own. So there's with the don't date, don't date. So then there's a learning curve, right? Understanding interpersonal dynamics with, if you are someone like me who's one of three girls and sisters, no brothers, and it's even understanding men and learning about men and all of that. If that's regardless, learning about, there's a learning curve with dating for everybody. With the don't ask, don't tell, sometimes there's an unlearning curve, right? Because sometimes we have experiences then that become blocks to us with future. We end up maybe a lot of times projecting things on other people. Like I say that our next, the person we're with is not, we shouldn't be projecting what happened with the last person, but it is so human to do that, right? And so there are all different things that come along with that. So there's learning, there's unlearning as well. So that was my journey. That's a journey I help our clients with. And also sometimes it is kind of interesting. I think we're at a really exciting time in history for women where we can really make our own rules, kind of be very intentional in the kind of life we want. So this whole concept of design a life, right? I think we can credit Tim Ferriss from 4 Hour Work Week with that term. But this whole idea of design a life really resonated with me, right? So while I was practicing law, I still remember, and this is laughable. It's actually laughable post-COVID. And I actually had a conversation about that today with somebody, but it was, for me, go back years ago when I was practicing law, I remember going to one of the partners of our law firm, and it was in private practice. And he was someone who kind of the old school, he had his stay-at-home wife at home, and he had kids. He probably saw the office as a refuge to just get away from the chaos, right? Family life. So when I went to him saying, hey, in my head, I'm thinking, okay, thinking, kids and all this in the future. For me, that was something I wanted. I was like, oh, kind of the idea of remote work, right? The idea of I could be working anywhere and getting stuff done. He had no idea what I was talking about. He's like, what? Like it was a different language completely. And so I was like, this is probably not my path for the rest of my life. It just wasn't, I didn't see it fitting in with everything. I wanted to live a full life for what that was for me. And I've always had I think in an entrepreneurial mindset, the idea of creating something high impact where I could use kind of my zone of genius and help people and in a way that is high stakes, right? I do get excited by working on, helping people along some important parts, right? I can't think of anything more important in terms of decision making than who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. So that kind of comes full force. So I credit my philosophy background with that, right? Like I was, again, really focused on school, career was a don't date, okay, get married. So I was asking the kind of questions I think a lot of people ask, much later in life in terms of philosophy. I was like really, so for me, the idea of a meaningful life, a fulfilling life was something I was really thinking about quite early on. And so from that perspective, I do feel that that was something that was with me, that whatever I want to do for the rest of my life, I want it to be high impact, right? So full circle, that kind of came that way.
and and it's not foreign to your culture, and I'm so pleased to see that in the US it's becoming more a part of our culture to work with matchmakers, because with what's going on today and the disconnect and the loneliness epidemic and AI and technology, and which I'm a fan of technology. You've known me for years, but it's not going to replace
Yes.
matchmaking. I could say that. Um, you say matchmaking is for singles who value their time over money. I love that because I agree wholeheartedly. Can you unpack that and what it means for people who are thinking of hiring a matchmaker?
Absolutely. So we sometimes have people who come to us and and it is an investment. To work with a matchmaker is an absolute investment in one's life. Yeah, kind of like, education is. Most of our we tend to draw a pretty highly educated clientele. So a lot of people have invested considerably in their careers, in their education. And I feel that the idea of investing at that level in your personal life is something that is not ubiquitous, not something that people think of. I say people might have a budget for a house, for education, for cars. People don't think of a budget for finding their partners.
Yeah.
But for my and we come from a culture where like weddings are not a day, they can be like a week, right? So from that perspective, it is, I say it's really, at the end of the day, what's going to be more important is being the marriage, being with the right person, more so than kind of all the festivities that are involved. Think of how much attention we pay, like anything, and this is in both the West and the East, right? Like
Mhm.
anything from tasting to get that menu, all that kind of intention that we put into that wedding or that those festivities, think if we put that level of intention in who we are going to journey life with, right? And that intention. So for some people, right, if that is something they do on their own, that is great. But what we can't get back is a passage of time if that hasn't quite happened for us, right? And I do feel like there are many, many people who've sort of given up, right? And I always say that you can, there are all different ways to make money, to financial resources. They are out there. There are all different ways we can do that. What we can't do is get time back. So whether that's the times past where there are women who kind of wanted kids and aren't having them, same with men. There are all different things like that are going on. And that goes back to the design of life. What do you want in your life and how can we help you get there? Right. So in terms of the time money equation, in my mind, there is, you know, those resources are very, very different. They're both valuable resources. One is replenishable, one is not. No matter how much money one has, we cannot get time back. And that is why I always say time over money in terms of the value proposition.
Uh, I mean, you're spot on that, and I couldn't agree more. And really, the amount of effort that matchmakers put into vetting people, interviewing so many people before. Maybe you interview 20 people before you can bring forward one person that is qualified to meet your client. That's really truly buying your time back. Having someone, outsourcing that and having someone who's an expert at what they're doing. And also, in your case, because you're a coach, you also help people with how to approach dating, which is huge, especially if you're coming from the, don't date, now get married. You don't have that experience, so it's invaluable. You also believe feedback is the secret sauce of matchmaking. Why is that so powerful compared to dating apps and that whole experience?
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about what feedback is, right? So feedback is when a matchmaker, after that introduction, after that date, independently connects with both people to not only gauge whether there's mutual interest in moving forward. So it's not like, oh, can I have your number? Just because someone feels like if they don't ask that, like it's what he should do, or a woman giving the number, even though she really doesn't ever want to hear from him again because she feels she should do that, or flip the genders, what have you. There's a lot of that that goes on. There's a lot of ghosting. There's a lot of all of that that goes on, right? And so the feedback is meant to let's be real here. Let's really understand, is there truly a mutual interest in going forward? And if so, great. And also, if there is, then is there still any learnings there for our client, right? We all have blind spots, every one of us. Yeah. So from that perspective, the feedback is really that opportunity to learn. That's where that growth can happen, right? And the growth can happen faster. It can save a lot of people in terms of the time. It can save a lot of emotional energy. So we're talking about an investment with respect to time's value, but I think it's really important to keep in mind the toll on emotional energy that is happening because a lot of it to be able to stay on the path to your partner, you know, you need to stay on the path. And what's happening for a lot of people, I feel, is they're kind of giving up or they're on and off, on and off. It's kind of like they reach a breaking point and they're like, I'm done. Then they do want to share their life with someone. So they're back on because that's the only thing they know as to how to find somebody. And so it's kind of a back and forth, but each time it's almost like you're going backwards, right? The progress, the momentum is lost. And so that emotional energy, I think, is super important. And feedback is something that helps with that, right? Because then, it's and that and the feedback happens early on. So if it's not going to go anywhere, it's not that someone invested considerable time, energy in something, and then it's not going forward. But okay, great. The next is the next person, right? And we get less tied to the outcome of any one interaction and more see each one as a learning opportunity. And that is the key to everything, right? It's for anything. There is no single, in my opinion, there's no single who truly, truly wants to be partnered up, who can't be. I don't care anything about them. There's none. But, and it's a big but, they need to stay in the game because there's no single who will be partnered up if they quit, right? There's just none. So from that perspective, I think that that feedback is the magic sauce, and not only that gives us insights into the blind spots that may have been coming in the way before, anything blocking us. And it also, right, helps us to move on if we're going to move on, stay in if there's a reason to stay in. And so, from that perspective, that is people think matchmaking, oh, what's so exciting is I'm going to meet high caliber people I'm not able to meet any other way. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of vetting that goes into it, and we have access that is unparalleled. So there's something to that. But the real thing is the feedback. That to me is sort of, like I said, the magic sauce.
I agree because, and sometimes, and I'm sure you've done this many times over the years, you talk people out of their own way and they end up going on that second and third date with someone that they were going to write off because on their own, they're going to a lot of first dates and never to a second date. And I think having that liaison to help, encourage you and talk you out of your own way, which usually comes after the date during the feedback, that is so invaluable because I mean, otherwise, I know people that are in relationships because they had that feedback. I also want to comment on what you said, which is so important. Oh my gosh, this is like the biggest message I can give any dater right now. Do not take yourself out of the game. If you are, if you want to be in a committed relationship, which is what you said, Jasmina, stay in the game. And that's where I think matchmaking is like so uniquely suited for people who are intentional and really want to meet someone because you're not getting the quantity. That's what you're going to get online and you're going to get burnt out and everything else. You're getting quality because your matchmakers are working so hard to find the right people for you. And you're staying in the game because you're being encouraged and supported and all those things. And I find so many people, women who let's say want to have children and they start dating, then they get burnt out, then they're like, okay, well, I'm tired, I need a break, or I need to go find myself, or I need to work on myself. And I'm like, you can still work on yourself and still be dating and pursuing your significant other. And so people waste so much time, and like you said, the time is so precious, you can never get it back. um, for those who think matchmaking sounds nice, but it's probably not for me, what would you say to them?
So it depends on why they say it's not for them, right? Because I really I can't think of a decision that's more high stakes than who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. I can't think of when you have an opportunity to walk a path and get support from somebody who friends and family can be really great, but sometimes, family and friends can have their own anxieties, right? They can be projecting a lot. They have perception biases as to who we are. So, for all of those reasons, having someone who's aligned and on your team can be really, really helpful. I will also say that women in particular can be socialized to be cheerleaders of each other, which I think is amazing because we all need cheerleaders, right? In that sense in our life. But the big but here is sometimes instead of saying, well, what a jerk, sometimes it's really, really helpful is to turn a mirror on someone or to be a devil's advocate, right? My legal training, actually, I use it very regularly. So it was funny when you said, so I feel like I'm using, so from that perspective, sometimes that gives the epiphany someone needs to truly move forward in their personal life, right? So I think that there are so many reasons, right? That the investment in a matchmaker or in matchmaking makes a lot of sense for a lot of people. So that's how I'd say that. And I think that the other thing to keep in mind, there are so many different offerings. I mean, the industry has expanded to a level where there matchmaking can be an investment. For us, it is an investment, but I know that there are much like anything else, whether it be any other services, right? There are all different levels of that. And so something is better than nothing, probably from that perspective. So I would say, there is, given the state of the industry, there's likely a matchmaker for people who think there may not actually be one for them.
Yeah.
That's
Well, I think what I love about your work and your business is the cultural competency because you were saying, if someone comes to you, you understand their background, you understand where they're coming from, you've been there, done it, and there's a different level of connection because I always believe the first match is your matchmaker. And so
mhm.
working with daters who feel understood and feel supported and feel that you have that cultural competency. I mean, that's major. And I highly recommend that anyone looking for a matchmaker find a matchmaker who truly understands them and their background so that they're not confused and start introducing you to the wrong people because that I've seen that happen quite a bit in our industry. um, we have a lot of aspiring matchmakers watching this series, and as someone who came from a completely different field, what would you say
Mhm.
to someone considering this as their next career or the next chapter in their career?
Sure. So one, I would say it's a fabulous way to make high impact in people's lives. So I would say look at your skill set, right? And look at your background and look at all of that and figure out where you can really carve out that area where you can be working in your zone of genius, right? For a lot, it's all different. For some people, they're all different. I know that my educational, cultural background, they all, and my adventures in dating, that all feeds into how I go about things, how I design the service. And I feel that that is the common thread for all of us matchmakers in that our backgrounds are of all different levels, whether it be educational, career, cultural, really does, and our own experiences really does feed into the service we provide. So I will say that everyone figure out where uniquely you lie in that way, so you can identify who you can best support. And those people can gravitate towards you as well and recognize that you are, like you said, the matchmaker for them because, as you said, the first match is your matchmaker. So figure out who you are the best matchmaker for. Yeah.
I love
And
it.
that's likely a function of all that I said.
Absolutely. Jasbina, thank you so much for this rich conversation and for being such a thoughtful force in our space. You've given our audience so much clarity around what's really happening in modern dating and how matchmaking is becoming the antidote to dating fatigue. Thank you.
My pleasure, Arlene.